If you asked me 6 months ago, hell, even 3 months ago, whether I thought it was worth bringing a dragon if you could do so, I'd have said hell yes. Now I'm starting to wonder if that's no longer the case. Over the last few months, I've been playing into a lot of really good players. I've been getting a lot of experience, and I feel like the meta has also been changing over the last sort of 6 or 8 months or so as well. And I've reached a point where I'm not sure that I'm going to be running dragons, at least for the foreseeable future. Now, I'm not saying I'm not going to, but I'm definitely considering writing lists without. Whereas previously, a lot of my list writing would have been, okay, let's start with a dragon, let's go from there, what can we fit in the rest of the 1500 points that I have remaining? To be clear, this is in no way me looking for sympathy as someone who has been playing a dragon for, again, the last 8 months or so. I understand that a lot of people don't love that they're in the game in the way that they are. They have warped the game around them. When you're writing a list, you have to think, how do I deal with dragons? Plenty of aspects there. It wouldn't be the end of the world for them to go away, honestly. If we're being realistic, I'd like them to still be in the game, but a lower percentage of the meta, maybe not as good as they are. You know, maybe hopefully we see something like stomps toned down, infantry brought up to par. There's lots of things that could be done to make it so dragons aren't the be all and end all. But that aside, in the meta that we have right now, do I think dragons are worth playing? And the answer is, I don't know, honestly. I've been finding it harder and harder to win with a dragon, which is a good thing for the state of the game, don't get me wrong, but it feels like the meta is increasingly volatile and inhospitable to my beloved T6 winged monsters. So let's talk about why dragons are good, what is good against dragons, and why I think that maybe there's a space to play the game without dragons now if you're playing one of the elf armies or warriors of chaos. The first thing we've got as a dragon is you are a huge bundle of stats, and while your dragon's going to end up usually somewhere around the 500 point mark, and you end up with around 9, maybe 10 wounds if you're talking chaos, but they are a little bit more expensive, you're probably looking at, what, something like 55 points per wound, which sounds quite dear for what you get. However, the problem is they're all high toughness. You know, dragons typically start at T6. If you're looking at putting a wizard on a dragon, sometimes Warriors of Chaos looking at you, Tomb Kings as well. You're looking at a T5 dragon, which is less effective. And then also the undead dragons as well have different stat profiles than the flesh-covered dragons or the scale-covered dragons that we all sort of know and I'll say love, but maybe not. Mostly the elf ones, which come in at a T6 across the board. You're looking at 9 wounds, you're looking at full plate, but then you can equip items onto them as well. That brings us on to the main point with dragons. If you just had a T6 dragon that was flying around with full plate and no other saves, they'd be absolutely fine. You know, they'd be good, but those cannons that are touted as the fix for dragons actually would kind of do a good job against them, because a lot of the time you're looking at a flat AP 2 or 3, so taking them down to a 6 up save at best. If you roll a 6 on the wound, the armor bane will take you to no save at all, and then we're straight into multiple wounds. And also, it's really easy to hit cannonballs. It's easy to wound a dragon with cannonballs. You're looking at 2s on all cannons. So they would feast on a dragon up until we got to the layered saves portion of it. And it's the layered saves portion that really pushed dragons into being a problem, if we're being frank. So, the dragon as it stands, coming from previous editions, you had separate, there were no combined profiles, is basically what I'm trying to say. So you'd have separate stats for the dragon and the rider. So if you got shot by a cannonball, which were better in previous editions, you would randomize whether you hit the dragon or the person on top. If you hit the squishy elf on top of the cannonball and you failed whatever ward save you had, or, you know, similar defensive profile, your rider is probably just snuffed out of the game. You know, roll a 3 on the d6, 3+, and suddenly the elf is dead. We don't have that problem anymore. What we do have is the problem of being able to buy 100 points of magic items that we can put on top of the very effective stat line of 9 wounds at T6. And it starts with armor saves. Multiple armies have ways to get good armor saves. In fact, I'd say the baseline for a dragon's armor save, assuming you're not putting a wizard on it or you're doing something weird, looking at you, undead, is a 3-up. And it's very easy for elves especially to get to a 2-up. High elves, they've got the dragon helm, so they can get to that 2-up armor save with full plate dragon helm and a shield. Then we've also got the, well, Wood Elves are stuck at 4-ups. They can't really do much. Maybe they could get full plate and a shield. I think you could get a 3-up save on a Wood Elf Dragon, but you generally don't. Dark Elf Dragon can get to a 2-up save against shooting between full plate, shield, and then the Sea Dragon Cloak. Obviously, not as good against magic missiles or magical attacks, but that's kind of by the by. Then we get to the ward saves. All armies that can take dragons have ward saves. Obviously, you've got a Talisman of Protection in the extremely common, in the core magic items, I should say. So you can only take one of them, but multiple armies have ways of stacking saves on multiple dragons. So starting off, you've got Talisman of Protection. That's your baseline, 30 points for a 5-up ward. Warriors of Chaos just come with that baked in straight away, so that's really good for them. Into the Elves, you've got the Pendant of Calith for Dark Elves, where you've got a 5-up ward save that becomes a 4-up ward save against T5 or greater, which, shocker, that's the stuff that's typically killing dragons outside of Viletide. High Elves, they only really have a 5-up ward save. Psych, they've got Opal Amulets, single one, extremely common items that give you a 2-up ward save once per use, but you can take 2 of those and tool up your dragon to the 9s anyway, and it doesn't really matter. So you can see there's lots of different ways to get ward saves in there. If you go to the Undead, you can get a 4-up ward save if you want to risk Stupidity for vampire counts, and you've got 2 different ways of getting a ward save in Tomb Kings. You've got the normal Talisman Protection, and then you've got the... I've forgotten the name of it. It's a heavy armor that you can put on your wizards. I want to say it's something like Warding Stave or something like that, but that wouldn't make any sense. Anyway, my point being, all of the armies have ways of getting at least one 5-up ward save, probably 2 5-up ward save if you want to double down, do double dragon. Then we get to the real issue, which is regens as well. Seed of Rebirth for High Elves. This is not an okay item. It's a 5-up ward, 5-up regen, which comes in the extremely common slot, so you can just stack it with anything else that you want. Suddenly you can take, we're not doing this at the moment, but you could theoretically take 3 Sun Dragons, the cheap T5 ones, with Nobles on top, give them, some sort of save outside of that, but then also give them a 5-up regen as well. Yes, regens are worse than ward saves. You lose them to some things, and also you still take, anything saved on a regen is counted towards combat res. However, having a 3rd save is really strong, and it stops things like cannonballs, which is really important. Having that extra 5-up to stop a cannonball is huge. Going from a 5-up save, you save a 3rd of the incoming damage. A 5-up, you save about 55% of the incoming damage. So it's a big jump. Even if you're ignoring armor saves, you've got less than 50% chance to get through, which on something like a dragon with that really high toughness and the really high number of wounds, probably not okay for the game. So that is why dragons are a problem in terms of defensive profile. We all know what they can do in terms of stomps. They are super reliable. They've got a good number of attacks. The person on top, then you've got the dragon themselves, usually combines to 10 or 11 attacks, which will be, if you go in Great Weapon, for example, you're going to be hitting on 3s most of the time. You're going to be wounding on 2s because strength 6, strength 7. Then you're going to be AP2 across the board. Jobs are good, and you're going to be doing loads of wounds. If that's not enough, you've got the stomps as well. Stomps, D6 auto hits, AP2 as well. Right. We know why they're good. They're very reliable. They do huge amounts of damage. They're very difficult to interact with outside of, very specific things, which have become popular in the meta, but also they're super fast. You can fly one and park it in front of your opponent's army pretty easily. I bang on about loving Arcane Urgency with a dragon. It's good. You can even do it without Arcane Urgency. You just end up 4 inches away from their deployment zone because they fly 10 inches, march 20 inches, have Swift Stride. So that's me going on a brief 7-minute rant about why dragons are a problem. Let's have a look at the things that attack those angles and the weaknesses of dragons and how they've become so prevalent. The first problem that dragons have is that they are close order, and this is one of their strengths because it's giving them more combat res towards beating infantry. The classic way to beat a dragon in a straight combat is to get static combat res 7, challenge them out with a 1 wound unit champion, lose the combat, take 1 wound, 5 points of overkill, and a single point of combat res for close order. You match them, you win because you've got a musician, you double outnumber them, the dragon runs away. All well and good. However, close order is also a downside because it means that they've only got a 90-degree vision arc. That is very fair. That is probably how this game should be played entirely. However, there are things in this game that will cause issues for you if you've got that. And I'm talking basically Bretonnians. Bretonnians, they have Pegasus Knights, which are skirmishers. They're just as fast as you, sometimes faster if you've got a slightly slower dragon. Because let's not forget stuff like the Wyvern, which is not quite as good as a dragon, but, you know, significantly cheaper. So you've got as fast as you or faster Pegasus Knights that can be out of your charge arc very comfortably, but have a 360-degree charge arc, which is a real problem in and of itself. And then they can bunker things in there that can deal with your dragon. So your opponent can either get past your dragon very quickly and kill everything behind you, or get past your dragon, stay out of the charge arc, and then if you try and turn to face, they just charge you with some sort of virtue of Monster Slayer and kill you to death, which is, again, this is not me as someone who enjoys dragons going, woe is me, give me sympathy, these things shouldn't exist. I'm just trying to explain why I think that maybe the dragon is on the way out. So, first of all, close order. You've got a 90-degree charge arc. That's a real problem if you're playing against someone that is more mobile than you. Second of all, large target. Again, something that's so good for dragons, and was so good for dragons for the first year, most of a year, I'd say, since the game came out. Why is it good? Well, you can see over things, and if your opponent is trying to screen you with, you know, a block of infantry or cavalry, they're like, oh, I've set up my lines so that I'm going to make it, if you charge this unit of cavalry, you'll overrun at a weird angle and you won't catch anything, and that gives me a little bit more time. You know, I'm feeding a unit to the dragon. It doesn't work like that. I can see over the top of you. So if you've got 2 units and you're trying to protect one with a unit at the front that's angled funnily, I'm probably just going to be able to charge over the top with my dragon to get the juicy unit behind. However, large target. Not only can I see every model can see me, and that comes into grip when we've got something like the poison shooting brick. Now, you may remember one of the most popular videos that I have done on this channel with David Brewis, who came up with the horrendous goblin poison shooting star. Congratulations, David, you've made my life more difficult. Dave, obviously, also Team England, doing very well for us, playing very well, having a great time with his goblins, with his fanatics as well. Now, that unit without dragons probably doesn't exist, because it was the solving of a problem. How do we deal with large targets? Well, what if I layer all of these buffs, all of these debuffs, take a massive unit that I can teleport around the board, and then just shoot a dragon to death in one round of combat? And that's because poison shooting exists. And when you've got a huge unit, I believe, and I'd have to have a look at the most recent lists, I believe he's running something in the realm of 90 goblins. Goblins are very cheap, but then he's layering it with other things so that, you know, I can't just tear him off the board. He's got immune psychology in there. He's got multiple sources of reliability, so extra AP. You know, you're looking at re-rolling ones to hit with Evil Sun Shining, Plague of Rust, getting rid of armor saves on the dragon. Makes it very difficult to play against as the dragon player, which, again, not complaining, just setting up the stage for the armies that are really good into the meta. So, okay, so far, Bretonnians who are really good on their own, great stuff. Then poison shooting. Now, poison shooting isn't limited to one army, unfortunately. I feel like goblins maybe do it best, but there are other armies that I would say are better that can take poison shooting and just put it into their list and be more well-rounded against the meta. Talking pretty specifically about Tomb Kings, not even the Royal Host list, but you can just play a Tomb Kings list that also has 60 poison skeleton archers in there. They don't have to worry about being outranged because they've got warbows, so they've got that 24-inch range instead of 18 inches. Then you've also got, you're always hitting in 5s, so you can't be negative penalties to hit out, which is one of the ways that you can beat the poison shooting star. So there's a lot of issues in terms of trying to beat that aspect of the poison brick. And undead in general, also pretty good against dragons. Vampire counts, obviously, if you get screamed to death, you're going to be really sad. Yes, elves do start with a higher leadership, but you can take that leadership down to a 7, or if you're playing against chaos, down to a 6, at which point, if you get hit by 3 or 4 screams, there is a really good chance that you just fall straight over, which is very difficult to play against. Obviously, you just have to stay out of range. It's very telegraphed where they can get to, an 8-inch range scream, 10-inch on the fly move if you put Spectral Steed on the Banshees. So, you've got tech in there that you can play against it, but it makes playing into vampire counts much more difficult. Also, undead have the ability to really tie you up in combat. You've got huge bricks of infantry that are fairly cheap because they've got to take something in their core, so whether it's Graveguard or the skeleton shooting brick or just a big unit of zombies, there's a lot of stuff that you can take. You don't even have to get them to unit strength 7 because they're unbreakable, so they're never going to run away. But if you can get them to unit strength 7, you get in there, you challenge them out with your unit champion, potentially you win the combat, and if you get lucky, run down the dragon. That's not super likely, but it is a world that we live in that, having experienced that myself. Or just, you lose combat, you lose 4 models to crumble, maybe less because you've got the BSB in there that's making it so you lose less models to crumbling after losing combat. Then, next turn, it's your turn. You use your resurrection ability and you bring back the unit champion, and then the dragon is stuck in challenge again with the unit champion, and it just sort of goes on and on. And again, you do have ways to play around this as the dragon player, don't get me wrong, you never single charge, you double charge, but then the way that you do that can be difficult. So one of the best ways to do it is with a second winged monster. So for example, the Griffin BSB, if I'm playing into Tomb Kings and they've got the poison shooting, and I go, here's my 2-up save dragon that's going to charge you, and also here's my 5 wound, only T5, 3-up armor save with much worse layered saves, Griffin with a BSB on it, you're probably just going to shoot that one, and I may end up losing the Griffin. Now, obviously, positioning, you've got to play well to get around that. That's all well and good. But again, just painting the picture for the things that can prey on vampires in the meta at the moment. Also, if you're ever unlucky enough to play against the now slightly defunct, people aren't really playing Double Casket, but if you do play against someone with Double Casket, there is a world where they can just shoot you off the board. Very similar to the Banshee Screams. It's a little harder to pull off, it's a little bit less reliable, but it's got much longer range and it's much harder to hide from. So, again, something else that is really good in the meta into dragons. Finally, we come to the things that are not even necessarily a dragon counter, but maybe there's things on the fringe. I should have mentioned this one before. The Warpfire Dragon. Warpfire Dragon's a great dragon counter, because, sure, it would lose a 1v1 against any lord in a challenge, but you just put your lord into a challenge with their lord, fly the Warpfire Dragon next to their dragon, but not yours, turn off their ward saves. Suddenly, your dragon's losing combat pretty consistently. There's not really anything you can do there to deal with it. So, Warpfire Dragon. Now, this is maybe cheating a little bit because it can be paired very well with a dragon, but it's a very solid way to, have that I want to kill a dragon problem. And it also goes well with the Chaos Lord on Steed, gives them the ability to deal with the dragon in combat, although it is a little closer than I think both players would want it to be, realistically. Fringe things, you've also got stuff like Chaos Dwarves, who can take the Black Orc Warboss on Wyvern, give them the Effigy of Mork, which gives them -1 to be hit, have them inside the Storm of Ash spell, which is a 9-inch bubble of -1 to be hit. Suddenly, you're hitting on 6s with your dragon and your lord. The stomps don't do anything because you're probably just going to go hand weapon shield with the Black Orc, so you've got a 2-up save. You're going to have probably only a charm shield, but then also the Trollhide Trousers. Realistically, that really tanky Wyvern's not going to die, and then you just combo charge in with some other stuff. I did actually end up losing a dragon the weekend just gone to basically this combo. Without the Storm of Ash, just hit the brick wall of the Wyvern, didn't do enough wounds. The next turn got charged by, a 360-degree Torok in my flank, and then also got charged by some static combat res in the form of a big brick of infantry. Between those two, lost the combat, double outnumbered, fled, did not flee far enough, got caught by the Torok. These are the things that you're going to have to deal with when you're playing into people who aren't necessarily even playing the meta, but have thought about how to beat the dragon player. So that leaves us with, what is a dragon good into? Because I've kind of just gone through all of the things that are good in the meta. Well, I think dragons are good into, unfortunately, the armies that aren't great. And I think, weirdly, it's put dragons in this sort of gatekeeper perspective. From the first time I saw this, and the first time I sort of really thought about it, was 8th edition Warhammer 40,000. If anyone has played that, they might remember Imperial Knights, or were Chaos Knights a thing at the time? I think it was just Imperial Knights. Basically, Knights are a big model with a lot of wounds and fairly good defenses that do a lot of damage, and you have to have a plan to deal with them. Sounds like a dragon, right? But they weren't winning events, Knights were the gatekeeper army. You'd go to an event, you'd be like, okay, Do I have something in my list to deal with a knight? I need to be able to kill a knight in one round of shooting or combat. 40k is way more lethal. You don't necessarily have to do that with dragons in the old world here, but you still have to have a plan for them. And you'd go, okay, my list doesn't have a way of dealing with Imperial, like, you know, with a knight, so I probably will not win this tournament. I've got to retool my list. And that's kind of where I feel like dragons sit at the moment, which is an interesting spot. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't play them if you like them. I think they're still a lot of fun to push around. Again, the Timmy in me, the little child that goes, I just want to play big monsters, push it forwards and go rah. Still a lot of fun. There's still a lot of flexibility you can do, especially when you pair it with something along the lines of, I don't know, Arcane Urgency, make you get a lot of value out of it, but it's harder and harder to do things with it. So if we talk about the things that it's good into, what's it good into? Well, it's good into non-poison armies. So stuff like Orcs and Goblins, Nomadic War, Troll Horde, both of those armies are kind of decent, like just good stat checks, but they don't exist because if you play into a dragon, you probably lose that game. Okay, sure. Empire. One of the big problems Empire has is, how do I kill a dragon? Yes, you can play the Illusion Mage, but it's a little hard to keep an Illusion Mage alive and in range of a dragon at the same time to keep hitting it with the Miasmic Mirage. And if you don't get the Miasmic Mirage or the Column of Crystal off, or the Column of Crystal gets dispelled, you know, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with that game plan, unfortunately. Especially if you're playing into Warriors of Chaos, where they've got the Infernal Puppet, and you can't lean on magic to be your defense against dragons because you're not going to be casting any spells. Okay, so some Orcs and Goblins armies, Empire, what else have we got? Just if you go through the meta, you know, Dwarves. Dwarves can deal with dragons, but they have to, I think, skew... In my opinion, they have to skew more in one way to deal with dragons than they do to deal with the rest of the field, like undead or something else. So I think that makes it a little harder for dwarves to play. I'm a little bit biased with dwarves. I think, obviously, I play against one of the best dwarf players in the world, so I'm aware that dwarves absolutely can cane a dragon. But I know a lot of people do struggle with it. And then you know, continue to go down the list. Wood Elves are in a bit of a difficult spot. Their dragon's not incredible, but that's the only thing they have, so other dragon armies probably play against it well. Beastmen as well. I know over here in the UK, we don't have a huge amount of Beastmen success at top end of tournaments. I think there's more across the pond around the world, but I think Beastmen, one of the things they struggle with is dragons. Yes, Valetide is incredible into them, but what if you just don't let them cast Valetide on you? Or if you have the Infernal Puppet covering your dragon? You know, there's a lot of stuff that you can do there. So to me, it feels like dragons are bad into the things that are good in the meta. So the good armies, Bretonnian, Tomb Kings, Vampire Counts, poison shooting stars like Goblins, all of these things that can win tournaments very well, I think dragons are poor into. And then you go, what are they good against? Well, they're good into Troll Horde, Nomadic War, Empire, Beastmen, any of the legacy armies that aren't playing Renegades. So, you know, they should beat regular Lizardmen. They should beat Skaven, both versions, realistically. They should beat Ogres, hands down, even with some Renegade tweaks, which I can't even remember what they do. But if you look at, you know, you look at it in those terms, suddenly, if you're wanting to win more games or you're wanting to win events, maybe a dragon isn't the way to go, which is where I've started to get to in terms of thinking about how I want to write lists, what I want to do to win events. Obviously, winning events isn't everything, but I've won 3 now, and it kind of feels like I should be... When I'm going to events, I should be going with the goal of trying to beat the good armies, do my best, and if that turns into a win, you know, that's what we're aiming for. So, am I the first person to think this? Absolutely not. I'm going to give a shout out to Pash. I will, if I remember, link his channel down below. He's been on the channel a couple of times. Pash Hammer is the name of his YouTube channel. He puts out a lot of fully recorded games that he plays. He's a very good player, ex-international player. I think he is currently subbing in for Wales on the online WTC. Not playing internationally this year, I believe due to personal commitments, because he would 100% make the team. So enough glazing about Pash. But Pash is the first person that I saw that took the list and went, actually, I don't know that I need a dragon to win with Warriors of Chaos. What if I just took the Dragon Lord out of my list, had the more flexible Chaos Lord that costs less points? Then I can do other things with it as well. Whether that's multiple wizards, I've got more points for stuff in rare, you know, you can play around with potentially more dragon ogres, the warpfire dragon, which is a dragon technically, but it's not the dragon lord. So I should probably be more clear that I'm specifically talking about the dragon lord, because just having the warpfire dragon in your list is usually going to be a good thing. So I think his list building has been down that sort of path for a long time, and I think it must be about 6 months or so since the last SBOT, Square-based online tournament. So yeah, I think that's the first example I've seen of someone doing really well at tournaments with a dragon army that doesn't actually take the dragon, and that's sort of started to filter through into my thinking. So how would I be writing lists? Because that's the sort of next thing. I've come to the conclusion that dragon armies are maybe a gatekeeper army, and you have to work harder to win with them in the current meta than you would if you were taking something along the lines of Vampire Counts or Tomb Kings. And that's not a knock on those players, it's just sort of identifying that maybe dragons aren't the number one top dog in the meta at the moment. So what am I thinking of doing? Well, I think maybe characters on 2-up save steeds might be a good place to look, and that's a little bit difficult to do for elves. There is some play around with it. I think maybe Cold One characters is something that I'll be looking at for Dark Elves. The problem is it works really well for Warriors of Chaos because you get so much juice out of your character. You start with, Strength 5. You start with that 4th wound. You start with 5 attacks, and you can get better and better through the game through the Gates of the Gods table. Elves are kind of stuck at Strength 4 base with 4 attacks, which is okay, but it's not setting the world on fire. And if I'm not having that crutch of a dragon to carry that lord in combat, he suddenly can't kill anywhere near as much. So maybe that's not the line to go down, but I think it is something interesting to play around with. And when I was playing Wood Elves, I was really enjoying the Stag Lord, who's got that 360-degree line of sight and the ability to just get where he needs to be. So characters on steeds with a really good save and some decent output, that might be the first place to look. So I'm gonna look into that. Second place to look is maybe just sort of drop the Combat Lord altogether. Maybe we look more at magic, and this does get a little bit dicey because there's a lot of ways to build magic resist into your list. Obviously, if you're playing against, for example, Chaos, they keep coming up because they're one of the best armies. I think, sidebar here, if you want to do well at events, if you are a mid-table player and you want to do well in the current state of the game and you've got a Chaos army, just play Chaos. They have the most straightforward path and most sort of direct linear power that you can play them. And it's not to say that you can't do well with them and you can't have skill expression with them, but the path to victory is usually pretty obvious. So while you're improving as a player, I think Warriors of the Chaos is a really good place to sit in. But yeah, so stuff like Warriors of Chaos, who you'll see a lot at tournaments, are a direct counter to that because they've got easy access to magic resist with the Brazen Collar, so that's a little bit of a problem. They've got the Infernal Puppet. If you're casting on 3d6, dropping the highest, you're not going to be casting a lot of your spells. And if your game plan, if your damage output is coming from spells, that's a real problem. So that's one thing. And then I guess the next angle to work down is the big buses of cavalry. And elves can kind of do that. So I want to play around with Dragon Princes, although I think I'd probably be playing with multiple sort of 6, 7, 8 man units for those. The Cold One Knight bus I think is a really interesting thing that I need to go back to developing, see how that plays, put some combat res in there, put some really hard hitters in there. I think that might be a good place to start playing. And then finally it's shooting. I've been underwhelmed by High Elf Sister shooting, but there are people who do well with it, so maybe I need to just buckle down and give it a full, play the full list with no dragon, double wizard in the unit, full commitment, and just take some lessons from that. I don't think it's a playstyle that I necessarily want to be playing in person. I haven't super loved playing it in WTC at the moment, but maybe that's just the direction that, if you want to win events with elves, maybe the High Elf Sister Star is the strongest way of playing them. I'm not sure. I'm much more interested in playing around with like a Banner of Resilience Death Star, so I need to test that out, see how it goes. But yeah, so that's the sort of thinking. Those are the next steps. I've identified that I don't think dragons are necessarily the number one way to play in the meta at the moment. What am I going to do about it? Am I still going to play a dragon? Honestly, maybe, because I think I play a dragon relatively well, and I think it has enough strengths that if you play it well, you can still get around the weaknesses. And maybe that's just enough for me at the moment to play around with and to use a dragon, but just make sure that I'm using it correctly and playing it well. Hopefully this has been interesting for you. This is not a video where I try and tell you how I think the correct way to play the game is. This is more an open discussion. I'm kind of just having an enlightenment moment. I almost feel like the time of dragon is over. The time of undead has not begun. It's been here for a while, but you know, maybe I just need to look in different angles. Perhaps I need to explore things in a different way that dragons are holding me back from doing. Am I going to keep playing a dragon? Maybe. I've said that multiple times. I love playing dragons, and maybe I just need to continue to play them and try and play them well. But let me know what you think. What are your favourite ways of playing the armies that are sort of currently leaning on dragons? So specifically elves, warriors of chaos. Do you take dragons? Do you not take dragons? Do you build around maybe key pet units and have a lot of success with them? When you've been playing the game for a while, at a high level, I think you start to develop blinkers in a way. So things that I look at and go aren't good, maybe are good, but only in specific angles. And I'm wondering what I've missed over the last 6 months as things have really changed in the meta. And I think that's where I want to look for the next few months, see if there's anything I can identify, anything that I can play as a playstyle that is different and good into the meta without just sort of harking back to the same old. So if you've got any thoughts, let me know in the comments. Appreciate all of the engagement, like the video, all of that good stuff. See you next time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for getting to the end of the video. If you've reached this point and you haven't already, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, a subscription if you haven't done those things. It just helps me get seen by more people, boost me up in the algorithm, all of the stuff that the YouTubers do like to say. If you would like to support me in my goal to become a full-time YouTuber, I would absolutely appreciate that. You can become a member below. There are various perks to those, name at the end of the videos, all that good stuff, but it also unlocks some VIP areas in Discord if you become a Longbeard or Ground Knight tier supporter. Those VIP sections are the only parts that are locked away in Discord. You don't have to be a member to join the Discord. I'd recommend that you should. We've got about 450, 500 people on there. It's a great place for discussion, a lot of fun. I do try and chime in as much as possible. And it's also where the Fix My List show lists are put, and also if you are one of the Ground Knight or Longbeard tier supporters, where you participate in choosing which list I play in the monthly Pick My List series.